So recently had a good question from somebody, which was, can you build muscle while being in a caloric deficit? So you're not eating as much as you're burning. Can you still build muscle? And the short answer is yes, absolutely, you can. Now the long answer is it's tough, and you can't gain weight. You're not going to bulk up if you're in a caloric deficit. But to build muscle and simultaneously burn fat, it can be done. To do that though, and I just wrote this in a recent article, you have to be pretty above average on three main pillars. And you can go check it out on my blog on the website, travisowenperformance.com. But those three pillars are how much you eat, when you eat, and the quality of food that you eat. So if you're pretty sound on those things, yes, you can build muscle and lose fat. But if you're in a caloric deficit, you're going to have trouble. You're not going to be able to gain weight overall. You're not going to be able to bulk up. Now, I assume the majority of people watching this are probably more interested in losing fat, toning up, as you would say, which means building muscle and losing fat. And so in that case, your body does need to be in a caloric deficit. Now, keep in mind that output chases intake, meaning the calories I burn, my metabolism, which is the sum of all parts of my body that are burning calories, that is a result of how much food is going into my mouth and being digested. I shouldn't say going into your mouth, but assimilated and digested, and that was touched on in my prior article as well. But when it comes down to it, you have to be in an overall surplus or deficit if you're looking to lose weight or gain weight. But again, that doesn't mean that we can just count the calories that go into our mouth. And you can check out the article for more, because that would be too long to go over here and we're getting off topic. But back to the point, output chases intake. So I can't just keep lowering my intake and expect my metabolism to continue burning the same amount of calories. As I continue to lower my food intake, my metabolism is going to get lower too. And we all probably kind of heard that, right? Oh, that person can eat whatever they want. They have a high metabolism. Well, their metabolism is chasing their intake. So they're eating a lot of food, thus their metabolic rate is pretty high. And I assume they're active too, because otherwise they're going to be gaining a lot of weight if they're eating that much food. Maybe they're not, maybe it's genetics. There's a lot of things that go into resting metabolic rate and basal metabolic rate, but the basics that we know, the fundamentals of it, are that output chases intake. So if you are eating more food, your metabolism is going to be faster. Back to the three pillars when it comes to trying to gain muscle and burn fat simultaneously: how much you eat, what you eat, and when you eat. Now, if you're not very good at one of them, you can still make pretty good progress if you're spot on the other two. So let's take a couple examples. So I've worked with a lot of people and have seen it done where they're not great with the quality of food that they eat, but they're spot on with when they eat and how much they eat. So they do, time restricted feeding or intermittent fasting, where they have a pretty small eating window. They eat pizza and some other kind of, junk now and then. They don't just, go to town and totally neglect their nutrition, but their quality of food is not spot on. However, the other two things are their feeding window and how much they eat. So they're not eating 5,000 calories in 2 or 3 hours, but rather they're getting pretty full enough to be able to make it the rest of the day. Even if they do get hungry, if it's not within their eating window, they don't eat. They just, you put up with the hunger and you wait till your next meal the next day. So that's one example of the three pillars where you're not great at one, but you're spot on the other two. So that's one option. The other option is be above average, be good at all three of those pillars. Doesn't mean you have to be perfectly spot on, but the closer you are to being spot on of those three, the more chance you'll have to gain muscle and burn fat simultaneously. Now, to just gain muscle or just burn fat is not as difficult. Basically, be in a caloric deficit and make sure you're resistance training and lifting enough that your body wants to hang on to muscle. Might not build muscle, but it's going to hang on to it. And you're in a caloric deficit, so you're going to burn fat. On the flip side, you really want to build muscle. You're okay with putting on some fat. Make sure you're in a caloric surplus, so start eating more. And make sure, obviously, you're resistance training as well, so that your body is putting on, more muscle. And also, if you're in a caloric surplus, you're going to be putting on fat too. We call that being in an anabolic state. So basically, your body is primed to build. Again, I assume most people watching this aren't looking to do that. So on the flip side, just want to reiterate how important it is to follow good nutrition and exercise if you're looking to burn fat. Because if we're simply in a caloric deficit, but we're not resistance training, we're not telling our body, hey, hang on to that muscle, then it's gonna burn muscle too, especially if you're protein deficient. So the important pillars for fat loss are making sure you're getting enough protein, making sure you're resistance training, and being in a caloric deficit so you're not overeating and your body's gonna preferentially burn more fat and hang on to the muscle that you've trained it to hang on to. So keep those things in mind. If someone tells you you can't burn fat and gain muscle simultaneously, tell them they're wrong, or at least tell yourself that they're wrong. But know that it's difficult and you need to be either above average and pretty good at those three pillars, or spot on two of them if you're not great at the other one. And obviously there's some genetics involved, that there's a lot of different factors involved in all these things. But I'm talking kind of the basic general average person, that I've worked with and that I've seen research studies involving as well, where they look at time restricted feeding and, large sample sizes and crossover studies, and let people eat whatever they want in a certain amount of time and measure their fat loss and different other health parameters. And we see some very interesting results. So this is based on research and experience, which I think is important. And, honestly, human physiology, which there's always things which I love about our field. There's always things that pop in and surprise us. Keep being curious, keep staying healthy.